The words hung in the air, heavy and blunt, "Your position is being eliminated." My first instinct was to react, but 22 years had taught me to absorb, to process, to calculate. So, I just smiled. It was a tight, controlled smile, the kind you wear when you're cornered but refuse to show it. Then I shook the man's hand and went home. That same day, I made a phone call that would stop their entire production line. Let me back up. My name's Mark, and I'm 54 years old. For over 2 decades, I was a senior mechanical engineer at Evergreen Dynamics. We built industrial packaging equipment, the kind of heavy machinery that fills, seals, and labels products for brands you see every day: food, cleaning supplies, pharmaceutical containers. If it rolled off an assembly line anywhere in the Great Lakes region, there was a good chance Evergreen's equipment touched it. I started there at 32. My 20s had been a blur of smaller engineering firms that either folded or got swallowed up. Evergreen felt different. Family-owned for 3 generations, decent benefits, a pension plan that actually mattered. It was the kind of place where you could build a career, not just collect a paycheck. The Sterling family had owned it since 1962. Arthur Sterling founded it. His son, Robert, expanded it. Robert's daughter, Eleanor, was running things when I joined in 2002. They understood that success came from keeping skilled workers. A revolutionary concept, apparently, in today's world. And I did build something there. Not just a career, but a machine. A real, honest-to-goodness machine. Back in 2009, Evergreen was struggling. The recession had hit manufacturing hard, and our main product line, reliable but slow, was getting hammered by cheaper overseas competitors. Clients wanted faster throughput without sacrificing quality, and our existing designs just couldn't deliver. I remember Eleanor Sterling explaining it in a weekly engineering meeting that February: orders down 32%, 2 major clients lost, a third shopping around. If we didn't differentiate ourselves, Evergreen might not survive another 2 years. That night, I went home and started sketching. Not for the company, not officially, just because I couldn't stop thinking about the problem. There had to be a way to increase sealing speed without losing precision. Every existing approach tried to make the mechanisms faster, but faster meant more heat, more wear, more variability. It felt like the wrong direction entirely. I spent the next 18 months in my garage workshop. Nights after dinner, when my wife was watching her shows. Weekends, while my friends were out fishing. Vacation days I never actually took. I designed a rotary sealing mechanism that could process containers 40% faster than anything else on the market, all while maintaining the tight tolerances our clients demanded. The key was a variable pressure cam system that adjusted automatically based on container material and thickness. Instead of running faster, I made it smarter. The machine read each container in real time and calibrated its pressure. Glass, plastic, aluminum, didn't matter. It adapted on the fly. It sounds simple now, but back then, it was genuinely novel. I burned through about $23,000 of my own money on materials, machining, and testing equipment. My wife thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was, but I knew I was onto something. Here's the important part: I developed this on my own time, using my own equipment, with my own money. My employment contract at the time had the standard intellectual property clause covering work done during company hours or using company resources. But I was obsessively careful. Every component bought with personal funds, every hour of development outside work. I kept receipts, time logs, dated photographs of my garage setup. I even had my neighbor witness and sign some documentation to verify the timeline. Paranoid? Absolutely. But I'd seen what happened to engineers who invented things on company time. The company owned everything. The inventor got a plaque and maybe a small bonus. I wanted something different if this actually worked. When I brought the concept to Evergreen's leadership in late 2009, they were interested but skeptical. The company was hemorrhaging money. They didn't have capital for unproven technology. Eleanor liked the idea, but her CFO kept shaking his head about the costs. So, I made them a deal. I'd license the patent to Evergreen exclusively for manufacturing and sales. In exchange, I'd receive a 3% royalty on every unit sold that incorporated my sealing mechanism. The agreement was crystal clear. I retained full ownership of the patent. Evergreen got exclusive rights to manufacture and sell, but only as long as the licensing agreement remained active. Lawyers reviewed everything. Both sides signed. Patent number 8,234,567 was registered in my name. The Evergreen RS400 rotary sealing system launched in 2011. It saved the company. Within 3 years, it became Evergreen's flagship product. The speed and precision were exactly what the market wanted. We went from a struggling regional manufacturer to an industry leader. Orders came in from across the country, then internationally. Evergreen opened a second facility just to keep up. The machine I'd designed in my garage was now generating roughly 40% of the company's total revenue. My royalty checks were substantial. Not retirement on a yacht money, but enough to pay off my house and build a comfortable cushion. My wife stopped thinking I was crazy and started thinking I was clever. That felt pretty good. More importantly, I was valued. Promoted to senior engineer, given my own development team, consulted on every major decision. When clients toured the facility, Eleanor always introduced me personally, the guy who saved Evergreen. The guy who built the machine. For 15 years, that's who I was. The company treated me well, I treated them well back. The relationship worked. Then the Sterling family sold the company. It happened fast. Eleanor was approaching 70, and her children had no interest in manufacturing. Private equity came calling with an offer too good to refuse. A firm out of Dallas with a name that sounded like a random word algorithm, Summit Ridge Ventures. By spring of last year, Evergreen Dynamics was theirs. I knew what private equity meant. They buy companies, squeeze out costs, and flip them within 5 years. The employees who built the value get discarded as operational inefficiencies. But I thought I was safe. I was essential. I held the patent on their most profitable product. My licensing agreement was ironclad. They couldn't touch me. All that paranoia back in 2009 was supposed to protect me now. Turns out I was only half right. The new leadership arrived within weeks. A CEO named Thomas Vance, who had an impressive MBA but no manufacturing experience, and a reputation for aggressive cost reduction. He looked like he'd stepped out of a business magazine. Perfect suit, perfect hair, a perfect smile that never quite reached his eyes. His CFO was Michael Brennan, mid-40s, former consulting background. He looked at spreadsheets the way a surgeon looks at a patient on the table, identifying what to cut. Every conversation with Michael felt like an efficiency audit. He'd ask about headcount while you were trying to explain technical processes. Completely missed the point, every single time. They also brought consultants, a team of young people in expensive clothes who walked through our facilities with clipboards, asking about staffing levels. They'd stop, watch people for a few minutes, make notes. Nobody ever explained what they were evaluating. That was the point, of course. Keep everyone nervous. Nervous people don't complain. The first 6 months were uncomfortable but manageable. Layoffs started in support departments, administrative staff first, then some middle management. Sarah from accounting, who'd been there almost as long as me, got a severance package in 2 weeks to clean out her desk. The guy who managed our warehouse for 15 years was replaced by someone younger and cheaper. The consultants kept circling engineering, but hadn't made any moves yet. We were too valuable. The RS400 was still the cash cow. You don't fire the people who understand how the cash cow works. I kept my head down, did my job, hoped the storm would pass, collected my royalty checks, and tried not to think about what was coming. Then came the pension review. Summit Ridge's financial team did a deep audit of all employee benefits. They discovered Evergreen's legacy pension plan was significantly underfunded relative to current obligations. The Sterling family had made up the difference through operating profits, but that didn't align with Summit Ridge's cost structure. They wanted to maximize short-term value for eventual resale. Pension obligations worked against that. Their solution was elegant. From a spreadsheet perspective, any employee within 18 months of pension vesting would be offered an early retirement package. Those who declined would be transitioned to a 401k match program. The company would no longer guarantee defined benefit pensions for new enrollments. I was 21 years into my employment. The pension vested at 22 years. 12 months away from locking in benefits I'd been earning for over 2 decades. The numbers weren't small. Full vesting meant about $4,200 per month for life starting at age 62, plus health insurance subsidies, plus survivor benefits for my wife. Total lifetime value, somewhere around $1.2 million, depending on how long I lived. 12 months short, and I'd get nothing, just a 401k balance that was a fraction of what had been promised. The meeting with Michael Brennan happened on a Tuesday afternoon in March. His office used to be the old conference room before the acquisition. Now it had frosted glass walls and furniture that cost more than most of our assembly line workers made in a month. There was abstract art on the walls, the kind that exists so people know you can afford art. Michael was sitting behind his desk when I arrived, not standing to greet me, not coming around to shake hands like Eleanor always did. Just sitting there with papers arranged in front of him like props. "Mark, thanks for coming in." He gestured to a chair. "Coffee?" I declined, sat down, and waited. Years had taught me that silence makes people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable people talk more than they should. Michael shuffled his papers. Important papers, apparently. He wanted me to see how many important papers he had. "I'm going to be direct with you because I respect your tenure here. We're restructuring the engineering division. Your position is being eliminated effective 30 days from now." I didn't react. Just sat there processing. My face neutral. Collect data first, react later. Michael took my silence as an invitation to continue. "You'll receive a severance package equal to 6 months' salary plus any accrued paid time off. Your health insurance will continue through COBRA for 18 months at subsidized rates. It's a competitive package given current market conditions." Still nothing from me. Michael seemed uncomfortable with the quiet. He shifted in his expensive chair, adjusted his expensive cufflinks. "Look, Mark, I understand you're close to pension vesting. Unfortunately, the restructuring timeline doesn't accommodate individual circumstances. It's just business. Don't take it personally." The words hung there. Asterisk just business. Don't take it personally, asterisk two phrases that always mean the exact opposite of what they claim. I nodded slowly. Just business. Exactly. He looked relieved that I seemed to be taking it so well. His rehearsed expression slipped for just a second. "We appreciate everything you've contributed over the years. Evergreen wouldn't be where it is today without your innovations." "You mean the RS-400? I asked. "Among other things, yes. That product line has been tremendously valuable." His tone was practiced, smooth, like he'd rehearsed this conversation in front of a mirror. I stood up. Michael extended his hand for a goodbye shake, a gesture meant to signal this was amicable, professional. Just two businessmen concluding a transaction. I took his hand, shook it firmly, and smiled. "Okay," I said. No argument, no threats, no emotional outburst, just acceptance. "I expected more pushback," he confessed. "Honestly, some of the other senior staff have been quite emotional about the transition." I kept smiling. "Would pushback change anything?" "No. Unfortunately, the decision is final." Then I'll save my energy. Thanks for the conversation, Michael. I walked out of his office. Kept my pace steady. Didn't hurry. Didn't hesitate. Collected my personal items from my desk while my coworkers watched with that awkward sympathy people show when they're relieved it wasn't them. Chris from my engineering team stopped by my desk. His face was pale. "Mark, I just heard. This is insane. You built this place." I shrugged. Apparently, that doesn't matter anymore. What are you going to do? Go home. Figure things out. Don't worry about me, Chris. You've got your own situation to manage. He nodded slowly, still looking sick about it. Good kid. Probably next on the chopping block. I handed my badge to security at the front desk. Walked to my car. Sat in the driver's seat for exactly 3 minutes, collecting my thoughts. Then I drove home. My wife was in the kitchen when I walked in. She saw my face before I said anything. "They did it," she stated. Not a question. Yep. 30 days. Just business. Don't take it personally. She didn't say anything. Just came over and hugged me. We stood there for a minute. Then she stepped back and looked at me with that expression she gets when she's thinking 3 moves ahead. "What's the plan?" I smiled. The same smile I'd given Michael Brennan. "I'm going to make a phone call." Evelyn Reed had been my intellectual property attorney since I filed the original patent in 2009. She was in her early 60s now, semi-retired, only taking cases that truly interested her. Mine always had. Something about an engineer who'd actually planned ahead for once. "Evelyn, it's Mark." They just laid me off. I heard her chair creak through the phone. She was probably in her home office, working on something else. Not anymore. When? Today. Effective in 30 days. 1 year before my pension vests. There was a pause, a long one. I could almost hear her mind working through the implications. Evelyn had a particular way of processing problems, methodical, thorough. The same traits that made her a good patent attorney made her dangerous in negotiations. "Mark," she said carefully, "have you reviewed your licensing agreement recently?" "Not in a few years." "Why?" "Because there's a termination clause. Section 12, paragraph 3. If either party materially breaches the spirit of the business relationship, the other party may terminate the licensing agreement with 30 days written notice." I remembered that clause. We'd included it as protection against Evergreen selling the company to someone who might try to exploit the technology inappropriately, export it overseas, license it to competitors without my knowledge, that sort of thing. But I'd always assumed it was theoretical, a safety net that would never actually be needed. Evelyn continued, "A reasonable argument could be made that terminating your employment specifically to avoid pension obligations constitutes a material breach of the business relationship spirit. You developed that technology while working there. They're using it to generate hundreds of millions in revenue. Cutting you loose to save pension costs while continuing to profit from your intellectual property could be seen as acting in bad faith. Would that argument hold up in court?" I asked. Maybe, maybe not. Courts don't like subjective standards. Spirit of the relationship is hard to prove. But here's what would definitely hold up. The licensing agreement requires continued royalty payments as long as Evergreen manufactures equipment using your patented technology. If they've stopped making royalty payments or attempted to invalidate your ownership, that's an unambiguous breach. When was your last payment? I thought about it. December. The 4th quarter payment came right on schedule. I hadn't received the 1st quarter payment yet, but it wasn't due until the end of April. Check your employment termination paperwork, Evelyn instructed. See if there's any language about the licensing agreement. I found the severance package documents Michael had handed me. A folder thick with legalese. Standard release of claims language. Non-disparagement clause. Benefits continuation information. I read through the whole thing twice. Found it on page 6. A single paragraph buried in the miscellaneous provision section. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. Designed to be missed. Employee acknowledges that all intellectual property developed during employment or related to company operations belongs to Evergreen Dynamics LLC and agrees to assign any outstanding claims to such property as a condition of receiving severance benefits. They were trying to take my patent. Quietly. Hidden in termination paperwork like a clause nobody would read. Asterisk sign here to get your severance. By the way, everything you invented is now ours. Asterisk Evelyn, I said, I think we have a problem. No, Mark. She almost laughed. Asterisk they asterisk have a problem. They just don't know it yet. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Evelyn assembled a legal team. Her partner handled corporate litigation. A younger associate specialized in patent disputes. Between them, they had more experience than Evergreen's entire legal department combined. I gathered every document related to the original patent development. The receipts showing personal purchases. Bank statements proving the money came from my accounts. The time logs. The dated photographs of my garage workshop. The signed witness statements from my neighbor. The original employment contract from 2002 that predated my patent work and contained no claims to independently developed intellectual property. That contract had been superseded by later versions, but none of them changed the IP provisions. I'd checked every time they asked me to sign an update. Always read the fine print. Always. The paper trail was bulletproof. My paranoia from 15 years ago was about to pay off. Evelyn drafted a cease and desist letter. 16 pages of precise legal language. I read through the whole thing with her on a video call. She explained each section. This paragraph establishes your undisputed ownership of the patent based on original documentation. This section details the licensing agreement terms and history of compliance. This part addresses the attempted fraudulent assignment in the severance documents. And this final section is the kill shot. What's the kill shot? She read it aloud. Therefore, pursuant to Section 12, Paragraph 3 of the licensing agreement, Mark Patterson hereby terminates said agreement effective immediately due to Evergreen Dynamics material breach through attempted fraudulent acquisition of patent rights. Any continued manufacture, sale, or distribution of equipment incorporating U.S. Patent 8,234,567 shall constitute willful patent infringement subject to enhanced statutory damages of up to $150,000 per unit. How many RS 400 units did they produce last year? I asked. About 800. So, if they make even one more unit after receiving this letter, they're potentially liable for $150,000 in damages. If they make 100, that's $15 million. If they keep producing at current rates, they'll bankrupt themselves within a year. Evelyn smiled. Exactly. We sent the cease and desist certified mail to Evergreen's corporate headquarters. Copies went to Thomas Vance, Michael Brennan, the legal department, the board of directors, and Summit Ridge Ventures general counsel in Dallas. Then we waited. The first response came 18 hours after delivery confirmation, an email from Evergreen's general counsel to Evelyn. Formal, carefully worded, requesting documentation supporting my ownership claims. Standard opening move. Pretend you don't know what you know until you see their cards. Evelyn sent everything. The full package. 200 pages of receipts, photographs, contracts, and witness statements. Let them see exactly how solid our position was. The second response came 2 days later. My phone rang. Unknown number, Dallas area code. Mr. Patterson, this is legal counsel for Summit Ridge Ventures. We need to schedule an immediate meeting regarding your recent correspondence. I directed them to Evelyn. She scheduled a video conference for the following Monday. Over that weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went fishing. Took my boat out on the lake, sat there with a line in the water, thinking about nothing in particular. My phone stayed in the car. The fish weren't biting. Didn't matter. I wasn't really there for the fish. Monday morning arrived. The video call included 6 people on their side, 2 Summit Ridge lawyers in an expensive conference room, Evergreen's general counsel looking nervous, Thomas Vance looking annoyed, Michael Brennan looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and someone introduced as a patent litigation specialist they'd retained from a big firm in Los Angeles. For $100 an hour minimum for someone like that. Evelyn and I were on our side. Just us. Her from her home office, me from my kitchen table. Thomas Vance spoke first. Mark, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We have no intention of claiming your patent. That clause in the severance documents was standard boilerplate language. It shouldn't have been included in your specific situation. I didn't respond. Evelyn had coached me to stay silent and let them talk. The more they talked, the more they revealed. Michael jumped in, trying to help. We're prepared to remove that language from your severance agreement and honor the original terms. The licensing agreement can continue as structured. There's no need for legal action here. Evelyn leaned forward into her camera. Let me make sure I understand. You're acknowledging that Evergreen Dynamics has no claim to U.S. Patent 8,234,567, that my client retains full ownership, and that the licensing agreement remains the governing document for any use of that technology. Yes, Thomas said quickly. Absolutely. This was all a misunderstanding. Good. Then you'll have no objection to signing an amended agreement that explicitly confirms those terms in writing. The lawyers on their side exchanged glances. The patent litigation specialist unmuted himself. His face was carefully neutral. Professional. What specific amendments are you proposing? Evelyn shared her screen. A document appeared, 23 pages of revised licensing terms. She'd spent the entire weekend preparing this. First, explicit confirmation that Mark Patterson is the sole owner of the patent, with no competing claims from Evergreen, Summit Ridge, or any affiliated entity. Second, a revised royalty structure reflecting the current market value of the technology. The original 3% was negotiated when the RS-400 was unproven. 15 years of market dominance justifies a renegotiation. Third, audit rights allowing my client to verify accurate reporting of units sold. Fourth, a personal guarantee from Summit Ridge Ventures that royalty obligations will be honored regardless of any future sale, restructuring, or bankruptcy of Evergreen Dynamics. The silence stretched for a full 15 seconds. I watched Michael Brennan's face go through 3 different shades of red. Those terms are significantly different from the original agreement, one of the Summit Ridge lawyers said carefully. The original agreement was negotiated when my client was a valued employee with job security and pension benefits, Evelyn replied. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. Circumstances have changed. My client's leverage has changed accordingly. Michael Brennan finally exploded. This is extortion. You're holding our production line hostage. No, Evelyn said. Her tone didn't change at all. This is intellectual property negotiation. My client owns technology that generates 40% of your portfolio company's revenue. You tried to take that technology through a fraudulent assignment clause hidden in severance documents. You terminated my client specifically to avoid pension obligations while continuing to profit from his innovation. If you'd like to discuss extortion, we can add those facts to the public record when we file our patent infringement lawsuit. The patent litigation specialist leaned forward. Let's be careful about characterizations here. Mr. Brennan's comments were expressing frustration, not making legal accusations. My client doesn't care about characterizations, Evelyn said. My client cares about fair compensation for his intellectual property. The terms I've outlined are reasonable. The alternative is litigation that will cost you significantly more in legal fees, damages, and lost production time than any royalty increase we're proposing. Thomas Vance held up his hand. Let's take a break. We need to discuss this internally. The call ended. Evelyn turned to me on the side chat. They'll counter, but they're scared. That litigation specialist they hired bills at least $400 an hour. They wouldn't have brought him in unless they knew they were exposed. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait. And while we wait, they have a decision to make. Keep producing RS 400 units and risk $150,000 per unit in damages, or stop production and start losing money every day. They can't fulfill orders. You think they'll stop? Evelyn smiled. I think they'll stop within 48 hours. She was right. The counter came 2 days later. They agreed to confirm my patent ownership in writing. They offered a modest increase in the royalty rate from 3% to 4%. They rejected the audit rights and personal guarantee. Evelyn rejected their counter. We demanded audit rights plus back payment of the first quarter royalty they'd been planning to withhold, plus a 7% rate going forward. They came back agreeing to audits with limited scope, but not the guarantee and not 7%. We demanded full audit rights and a personal guarantee covering at least 5 years of obligation. We'd accept 5%. Back and forth, 3 weeks of negotiations, calls and emails, revised documents. During that time, something interesting happened. Evergreen's production lines went quiet. Not officially. Publicly, they announced scheduled maintenance on the RS 400 production equipment. Routine upgrades to improve efficiency. Nothing to worry about. Orders would be delayed, but fulfilled within acceptable timeframes. But I knew the truth. Evelyn had sent a follow-up letter after our first cease and desist. It notified Evergreen that any units produced after the licensing termination date would constitute willful infringement. Each unit carried potential statutory damages. They couldn't risk it. Every RS 400 system they built was a potential lawsuit, so they stopped building them. I heard about it from Chris, my former colleague, who'd reached out after my termination. He called me on his personal phone after work hours. Mark, the floor is dead. Nothing moving. Management told us it's maintenance, but nobody believes that. The RS 400 line has been dark for 2 weeks. Any word on why? Chris paused. There's a rumor going around, something about your patent, about you not actually signing it over to the company. Is that true? I didn't confirm or deny. Just told Chris to keep his head down and not repeat anything he'd heard. 3 weeks of zero production on their flagship product. Customer orders piling up, delivery commitments being missed, competitors circling like sharks who smelled blood in the water. I heard through industry contacts that 2 major accounts had already started conversations with other vendors about backup supply arrangements. The phone calls from Summit Ridge Ventures to Thomas Vance were reportedly getting more frequent, more urgent, more angry. They'd bought Evergreen, expecting reliable cash flow from the RS 400. Instead, they were watching their investment deteriorate by the day. The final agreement came together on a Thursday afternoon. Evelyn called me with the details. Her voice was satisfied. They capitulated, she said. Full ownership confirmation with no competing claims. Royalty rate increased from 3% to 7%, retroactive to the acquisition date. Quarterly audit rights with independent verification. Personal guarantee from Summit Ridge covering all obligations for the next 7 years. And one more thing. What? Full pension vesting. They're going to reinstate your employment for the remaining 12 months, then allow you to retire with complete benefits as originally structured. You'll be on paid administrative leave during that period. No actual work required. I sat down hard on my couch. They gave me everything. They didn't have a choice, Mark. 3 weeks of shutdown cost them more than your pension is worth. Customer relationships were deteriorating. Their projected revenue for the quarter was shot. Summit Ridge's investment thesis for Evergreen Dynamics depended on the RS-400 revenue stream. Without your patent, that investment is worthless. They ran the numbers. Paying you was cheaper than fighting you. So, they paid. The reinstatement paperwork arrived the following week. A formal letter from Thomas Vance acknowledging that my termination had been processed in error due to miscommunication between divisions, and that I remained an employee in good standing with all benefits intact. The letter was nonsense, of course. Everyone knew what had actually happened, but it gave them cover to reverse course without admitting wrongdoing. Let them have their face-saving language. I had what I wanted. I signed the amended licensing agreement. Evelyn filed the necessary documents confirming the patent ownership and updated terms. The personal guarantee from Summit Ridge was recorded and filed properly. Everything buttoned up. Evergreen's production line started running again within 48 hours. I heard they brought in weekend shifts to try to catch up on the backlog. Some of the delayed orders were filled at cost just to keep customers from leaving. Over the next year, I collected my salary without working, watched from a distance as Summit Ridge struggled with the consequences of their own greed. The RS-400 delays had damaged customer relationships that took months to rebuild. 2 of Evergreen's senior engineers quit after seeing how they'd treated me. They'd reached out privately, asked me for references for other jobs. I gave them good ones. The company's reputation in the industry had taken a hit. Word gets around. People talk at trade shows. The story of the engineer who owned his own patent and shut down production became something of a legend in manufacturing circles. Summit Ridge didn't like that story being told. Nothing they could do about it. My royalty checks arrived quarterly. 7% instead of 3%. More than double what I'd been making. The audit reports showed accurate unit counts for the first time since I couldn't remember when. Turns out they'd been underreporting sales by about 15% for years. That discrepancy alone added nearly $80,000 in back payments. On the anniversary of my original termination date, I officially retired. Full pension, full benefits. A small ceremony in the Evergreen conference room where Thomas Vance shook my hand and thanked me for my contributions with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I shook back. Smiled the same smile I'd given Michael Brennan a year earlier when he told me it was just business. Just business, I said. Don't take it personally. He didn't laugh. My wife was waiting in the parking lot. We drove to our favorite restaurant for lunch, ordered the most expensive thing on the menu because we could. She raised her glass across the table. To patience, she said. To paranoia, I replied. Same thing sometimes. She laughed. 22 years of watching you organize receipts finally paid off. It really did. 6 months after my retirement, Summit Ridge sold Evergreen Dynamics to a larger industrial conglomerate. The sale price was reportedly 20% lower than their original projections due to customer attrition and competitive pressure during the shutdown period. The RS-400 remained the company's top product, but the damage from those 3 weeks had lasting effects. My licensing agreement transferred to the new owners automatically. The personal guarantee from Summit Ridge remained in effect for the full 7 years regardless of the sale. The royalty checks kept coming like clockwork. I got a call from Evelyn a few weeks after the sale closed. Just had an interesting conversation with the new ownership's legal team, she said. They wanted to understand the licensing terms before they finalized the acquisition. What did you tell them? The truth. That you own a patent generating 40% of their newly acquired revenue stream. That the licensing agreement is ironclad. That any attempt to modify terms without your consent would result in immediate termination and production shutdown. How did they take it? Better than Summit Ridge did. The new general counsel actually complimented the contract structure. Said it was some of the cleanest IP licensing he'd ever seen. Asked if you'd be interested in consulting on future development. I laughed. Consulting? Apparently your reputation precedes you. The engineer who outmaneuvered a private equity firm. They think you might have useful perspective. Funny how that works. Last month, I got an official letter from Evergreen's new engineering director. They were developing an upgraded version of the RS400 and wanted to know if I'd be interested in consulting. Market rates, plus a bonus for any patentable improvements. I wrote back with one condition: any new patents developed during the engagement would remain my property, licensed to Evergreen under terms I'd negotiate separately. They agreed immediately. First consulting session was 2 weeks ago. Flew me out to the facility, put me up in a nice hotel. The new engineering team had already started on some promising concepts, but hit a wall with a thermal management system. Same problem I'd solved 15 years ago with a different approach. Took me about 4 hours to sketch out a solution. They looked at me like I'd performed a magic trick. The team lead, a guy named Daniel, who'd been hired after the acquisition, pulled me aside. Said he'd heard stories about what happened with Summit Ridge, said everyone in the industry had heard. Asked if the rumors were true. I told him the rumors were probably conservative. He laughed. Said it was nice to finally meet the guy who taught private equity a lesson about reading contracts. Second session is next month. They're already talking about a retainer arrangement. So, here's the final scorecard. My pension, $1.2 million in lifetime benefits. Fully vested. Checks arrive on the 1st of every month. Royalty rate increased from 3% to 7%. That's an extra $180,000 per year compared to what I was making before. Back payments from audit discrepancies, $80,000. Turns out they'd been underreporting for years. Legal fees, $45,000, worth every penny. Consulting income, $4,800 for that first session alone. More coming. Total cost to Summit Ridge for trying to steal my patent, 3 weeks of production shutdown. Customer attrition that dropped their sale price by 20%. Legal fees north of $100,000. Michael Brennan's career, for months after the Evergreen sale closed, Summit Ridge let him go. Official reason was restructuring. Real reason was that the Evergreen situation became a case study in what not to do. The senior partners found out his hidden IP clause nearly cost them their entire investment. His position became untenable overnight. Last I heard, he was working at a smaller firm in St. Louis. Significant step down. Someone who knew him said he'd become very careful about reviewing termination documents. Thomas Vance landed at another private equity portfolio company 6 weeks after Evergreen sold. Similar role, different industry. Some people fail upward. Chris, my former colleague who'd kept me informed during the shutdown, got promoted to lead the engineering team after 2 of the senior guys quit. He called me last week to say thanks for the reference I'd given him years ago. Said the new ownership was actually listening to the engineers for once. The patent litigation specialist Summit Ridge hired never did any litigation. Billed them $28,000 for 3 weeks of meetings and analysis. Add it to the list. My wife and I booked a trip to Italy for next spring. First real vacation in probably 15 years. We're using the back payment money. Seemed fitting. The workshop in my garage is still running. Got a new project going that has nothing to do with sealing mechanisms. Just something interesting. No corporate entanglements. Just me and the problem. So that's the story. 22 years at a company. 1 year from pension vesting. A CFO who thought he could bury an intellectual property theft clause in my severance paperwork. A production line that went dark the moment they realized what they'd done. The cease and desist was 16 pages. The amended licensing agreement was 23. The smile I gave Michael Brennan when he fired me was the same one I gave Thomas Vance at my retirement ceremony. Just business. Don't take it personally. They told me that first. I just said it back. 3 months later, the consulting retainer came through. 12 sessions per year at $4,800 each, plus bonuses for patentable improvements, plus travel expenses covered. The new ownership sends a car to pick me up from the airport now. Different energy entirely from the Summit Ridge days. I ran into Eleanor Sterling at a trade show last month. She'd heard the whole story from someone on the board. She grabbed my arm and said she was sorry about what happened after the sale. Said she'd had no idea they would try something like that. I told her it worked out fine. Better than fine, actually. She laughed. Said she always knew I was the smart one. I filed my first new patent last month. Variable temperature calibration system for the RS400 upgrade. Patent will be in my name. Licensed to Evergreen under the same terms as the original. Evelyn reviewed everything. Bulletproof as usual. Michael Brennan apparently tried to get hired at another private equity firm in Dallas. They called Summit Ridge for a reference. The reference was not favorable. Word as they specifically mentioned the Evergreen situation. He ended up taking a position at a regional manufacturing company in Michigan. Director of Finance, not CFO. Director probably reviews every termination document personally now. Chris called me again last week. Said the RS400 upgrade prototype ran its first successful test cycle. Used my thermal management solution. Said my name came up in the leadership meeting as someone who should be recognized when the product launches. I told him recognition wasn't necessary. The royalty checks are recognition enough. My wife finished planning the Italy trip. 3 weeks, Rome, Florence, Venice, leaving in April. She's already bought new luggage. Says we should have done this years ago, but I was always too busy working. She's not wrong. The pension check arrived yesterday. For $1,247 direct deposit, right on schedule. Put most of it into the travel fund. The rest went towards some new equipment for the workshop. 22 years of keeping receipts. 18 months of garage workshop development. 15 years of royalty payments. 3 weeks of production shutdown. One CFO who learned an expensive lesson about reading employment contracts before trying to steal patents. They said it was just business. Turns out, I'm pretty good at business. After all that, was it truly just business, or something more?